My name is Marina, and for over 12 years I've been caring for lives inside hospitals. I've witnessed miracles, I've seen goodbyes, I've held trembling hands and wiped tears of relief, but never, in my entire career, had I experienced something that would forever change my perspective on courage, on maternal love, and on how far a nurse is willing to go to protect the lives under her care. It was a Tuesday in March when I met Sarah Johnson. She was 28 years old, brown hair always pulled back in a perfect bun, and that serene demeanor that only some people possess. Sarah worked in the neonatal intensive care unit at St. Mary's Children's Hospital here in Chicago for almost 5 years. And when I say she worked there, I'm not just talking about clocking in and following protocols. Sarah lived and breathed every baby in that unit as if they were her own children. It was during a nursing conference that we met. I was presenting a case about intensive care when she approached me during the break. "Marina," she said with that shy but warm smile, "I need to tell you a story. It's not about techniques or procedures. It's about something that happened to me that still makes me wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes crying, sometimes thanking God for giving me strength that day." We sat in one of the auditorium chairs, still empty after the presentation. Sarah looked at her own hands that I would soon discover were capable of embracing life in a way that few can understand, and began to speak. "Marina, have you ever wondered how many lives one person can save in a single day?" I thought I knew the answer. As a NICU nurse, I saved lives every day, one at a time, with care, with technique, with love. But on September 15th last year, I discovered that sometimes life puts us in situations where one person needs to become 50 different people, 50 pairs of arms, 50 hearts beating at the same time. Her voice became lower, more intimate, as if she were telling me a secret kept for a long time. It was a Saturday morning, still very early. I was on the night shift that extended until 7 in the morning. Our NICU had exactly 50 babies admitted that day. 50 little warriors fighting for life. Some born premature, others with various complications, but all needing constant intensive care. Sarah paused, took a deep breath, and continued. "That feeling when you sense something is different in the air? I've always had this heightened perception in the hospital. Maybe it's maternal instinct, maybe it's professional experience, but that morning I felt a strange restlessness. It was as if the universe was preparing me for something I would never imagine facing. It was exactly 5:47 in the morning when the first alarm went off. It wasn't a common medical equipment alarm. It was the fire alarm. Initially, we thought it was some electrical problem or a false alarm. These things happen in hospitals, but when we started to smell smoke coming from downstairs, and when we saw the first flames rising up the emergency stairwell, we understood we were facing a situation that went far beyond any protocol we had learned. I listened to her in absolute silence, my heart already racing just imagining the situation. Sarah continued, and I could see in her eyes that she was reliving every second of that moment. The fire had started in the laundry room, in the hospital's basement. Within minutes, the flames climbed through the ventilation ducts and began taking over the lower floors. Our NICU was on the 3rd floor, and the elevators had already stopped working for safety. The sprinkler system wasn't managing to contain the fire, and the smoke was getting thicker and thicker. In that moment, Marina, when I saw those 50 babies, some in incubators, others in warming beds, all connected to life support equipment, I felt something I had never felt before. It was as if my heart multiplied by 50, as if every fiber of my being was dedicated exclusively to protecting those innocent lives. I was no longer Sarah the nurse. I was Sarah, the mother of 50 children who needed me to survive. The way she spoke, the intensity in her eyes, made me understand I was witnessing one of the most extraordinary stories I had ever heard in my career. And this was just the beginning. "The emergency evacuation protocol is clear," Sarah continued, her intertwined fingers showing the tension she still carried from that morning. "In case of fire, we evacuate patients in order of priority. First those who can walk, then those who need wheelchairs, and lastly the critical patients. But Marina, how do you evacuate 50 premature babies, most connected to life support equipment, when you only have 2 emergency staircases available and smoke is rising rapidly?" She looked through the auditorium window, as if seeing that hospital on fire again. In that moment, I understood that all the protocols in the world hadn't been created for a situation like that. I was with 3 other colleagues on shift. Emma, a nurse like me, Dr. Michael Rodriguez, the unit's pediatrician, and Mark, our technician. 4 people to save 50 lives. The math was simple and terrifying. Dr. Rodriguez immediately began assessing which babies could be temporarily disconnected from equipment without life risk. Mark ran to get the portable transport incubators we had on the floor. Emma started organizing emergency medications. And I looked at those 50 little faces and made a decision that would change my life forever. Sarah paused, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. Marina, I decided I wouldn't leave that floor while the last baby wasn't safe. It didn't matter if the fire reached us. It didn't matter if I had to carry all of them in my arms, one by one. Those children were my responsibility, and I wouldn't abandon them. We started evacuating with the most stable cases. Dr. Rodriguez took 3 babies who were only under observation and ran down the stairs. Mark managed to put 2 preemies in a transport incubator and took them to the ground floor. Emma prepared syringes with medications to keep the most critical babies stable during transport. And I started doing something I never imagined would be possible. What Sarah told me next left me speechless. Marina, I started carrying the babies 2 at a time. I would take one in each arm, run down 3 flights of stairs, hand them over to the emergency teams that were already on the ground floor, and go back up again. The smoke was getting thicker with each trip. My lungs were burning. My arms were shaking from exhaustion. But each time I climbed those stairs and saw another little face waiting for me, I found strength I didn't know existed inside me. On the 5th trip, something happened that almost made me give up. When I reached the 3rd floor, I saw that the fire had reached the end of the corridor. The flames were less than 20 meters from the NICU. The temperature was unbearable, and the smoke was so thick I could barely see. In that moment, Marina, for the first time I thought, maybe I can't do it. Maybe I'll have to choose which babies to save and which ones to leave behind. Sarah's voice failed, and she needed a few seconds to compose herself. But then I looked inside the NICU and saw something that gave me strength to continue. The babies who were still there weren't crying. It was as if they knew I would come back for them. It was as if they trusted me completely. And in that moment, I understood it was no longer about protocols or training. It was about maternal love, about the silent promise we make when we choose to care for lives. At this point, I need to pause Sarah's story to speak directly to you who are listening to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this story is touching your heart somehow. And I want you to know that stories like Sarah's exist because there are people like you, people who believe in the power of love, in the power of care, in the power of never giving up when it comes to protecting those we love. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I want to make you a special invitation. Subscribe and activate the notification bell, because every week I bring you stories like this, stories that remind us what really matters in life. And you who follow me, you're like a family to me. In the comments, you share your own experiences, your own struggles, and this creates a support and love network that goes far beyond any video. Now, back to Sarah and her impossible mission to save 50 lives in the middle of a fire that was rapidly spreading through the hospital. Marina, do you believe in miracles? Sarah asked, and I could see this question wasn't rhetorical. It was a question she had asked herself many times since that day. Because what happened in the next 2 hours was something that defies any logical explanation I can give. She continued. When I understood the fire was dangerously approaching the NICU, I made a desperate decision. Instead of continuing to make several trips carrying 2 babies at a time, I decided to try to take the largest number possible at once. I know it sounds crazy, but I had to speed up the process. I took 3 of the largest blankets we had in the unit and created a kind of improvised sling. I managed to tie the blankets to my body so I could carry 6 babies at the same time, 2 in my arms, 2 strapped to my chest, and 2 on my back. Marina, I had never carried so much weight in my life. But in that moment, it was as if my body had gained supernatural strength. What Sarah described next gave me goosebumps. On the first descent carrying 6 babies, I almost fell on the stairs. My vision was blurred by the smoke, my lungs were burning, and the weight was almost unbearable. But when I reached the ground floor and saw the relieved faces of the emergency teams, when I saw those 6 babies being immediately attended to by paramedics, I knew I had found the solution. I went back up, this time accompanied by Mark, who had returned to help me. Together, we managed to organize a more efficient system. While I prepared the babies for transport, he helped carry them. Dr. Rodriguez also returned, along with 2 firefighters who had arrived with the first emergency team. But Marina, it was on the 12th trip that something happened that I'll never forget. When we reached the 3rd floor, we discovered the fire had blocked one of the emergency staircases. Now we only had one exit, and it was getting dangerously close to the flames. There were still 18 babies left in the NICU, and time was running out rapidly. Sarah stopped talking for a moment, closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, I could see she was intensely reliving that moment. That's when what I call a miracle happened. Suddenly, more firefighters started arriving, more paramedics, and even people from the community who had heard about the hospital fire. A human chain formed on the staircase. I would hand the babies to the first firefighter, who would pass them to the second, who would pass them to the third, and so on until they reached the ground floor safely. In 20 minutes, we managed to evacuate the remaining 18 babies. But when I thought everything was over, I discovered I had forgotten something fundamental. The medical records. Without them, the doctors on the ground floor wouldn't know which medications each baby was taking, what their specific conditions were, crucial information to keep them alive. What Sarah did next left me speechless. Marina, I went back. Even with the fire having taken half the corridor, even with the smoke so thick I could barely breathe, I went back to get those records, because each one of them represented a baby's life story, and without them, our entire rescue operation could have been in vain. When I entered the NICU for the last time, it was like being inside an oven. The temperature was unbearable, and I could hear the sound of flames approaching. I grabbed all the medical records I could find, put them inside a plastic bag to protect them from the smoke, and ran to the staircase. It was on the final descent that I almost couldn't make it. My lungs were so full of smoke I could barely breathe. My vision was completely blurred, and I felt like I was going to faint at any moment. But then I thought about the 50 babies down there waiting for that medical information, and that gave me strength to continue. When I finally reached the ground floor, I collapsed. I literally collapsed on the floor, coughing, crying, shaking. But when I handed those medical records to Dr. Rodriguez and saw the relief on his face, when I saw that now he could properly care for each baby, I knew it had been worth it. Sarah looked directly at me and said something I'll never forget. Marina, that day I understood that being a nurse isn't just about technical knowledge or following protocols. It's about being willing to give your own life to protect the lives that are under your care. It's about maternal love, about never giving up, about finding strength you didn't even know you had. And the 50 babies, Sarah, did they all survive? Was the first question I managed to ask after hearing that entire extraordinary story. The smile that spread across Sarah's face was the most beautiful answer I could have received. All of them, Marina. All 50 babies survived. Not only did they survive the fire, but they completely recovered from the entire evacuation operation. Some needed extra care for having inhaled a little smoke, but within a week they were all stable again. You know what moves me most about this story? She continued. 3 months after the fire, I received visits from some of these babies' parents. They had organized themselves to thank me personally. But Marina, what they brought me weren't just thanks. They brought me photos of the babies at home, already grown, some already crawling, others already babbling their first words. Sarah took a worn and lovingly kept photo from her pocket. This here is Tyler. He was one of the most critical preemies in the NICU that day. Born at only 2.6 pounds and had been in the incubator for 2 months. Look at him now. A healthy baby, rosy-cheeked, full of life. His mother told me that when she tells people about the fire, she always says Tyler was saved by an angel. Tears rolled down my face seeing that photo. And you, Sarah? How were you after everything? I spent 3 days in the hospital being treated for smoke inhalation. My lungs were severely compromised, and I had to do respiratory therapy for a few weeks. But you know what, Marina? Every therapy session, every medication I took, every day of recovery, I thought about those 50 babies at home with their families. and that made any discomfort completely worthwhile. But what changed most in me wasn't physical. It was emotional. After that day, I understood in a very profound way what it truly means to care for someone. It's not just about technique. It's not just about following procedures. It's about being willing to give everything of yourself. It's about unconditional love. It's about never leaving anyone behind. Sarah made a reflective pause and continued. Today, whenever I enter the NICU, which was completely rebuilt after the fire, now with even more advanced safety systems, I look at each baby and remember that day, and I make a silent promise to each one of them. While I'm here, you're safe. While I'm on duty, you're not alone. You know what was the most moving part of this entire experience? Sarah asked. And I could see in her eyes there was still more to tell. 2 weeks after the fire, the hospital administration organized a ceremony to honor me. They wanted to give me a medal, make speeches, call the press, but I asked that instead of a formal ceremony, we have a meeting with all the families of the babies who were saved. Marina, it was the most beautiful day of my professional life. 50 families gathered in the hospital auditorium, each one carrying their baby in their arms. And when I entered that auditorium and saw all those healthy little faces, all those happy and united families, I understood that was the greatest reward I could receive. One of the mothers stood up and said something that marked me forever. Sarah, you didn't just save our babies that day. You saved our futures, our dreams, our entire families. Every first smile, every first word, every first step of these babies will also be your victory. Then Sarah looked at me with that serenity that only people who have gone through transformative experiences can have. Marina, I learned that sometimes life puts us in situations that go far beyond what we think we can handle. But when we have a greater purpose, when we have true love motivating our actions, we discover we're capable of miracles. Today, when young nurses come to me for advice about the profession, I always say the same thing. Technique you learn from books, courses, practice, but truly caring for someone, that comes from the heart. And when you care with your heart, you're capable of anything. When Sarah finished telling her story, we sat in silence for a few minutes. They weren't uncomfortable silences. They were silences of reflection, of gratitude, of recognition for the extraordinary strength that exists within ordinary people who make extraordinary choices. If this story touched your heart in any way, know that you're not alone. We all carry our own battles, our fears, our doubts. But that's exactly why stories like this need to be told and heard. If you know someone who needs to hear this message of hope, share this video. Sometimes, one story can be the light someone needs to keep going. And if you have your own story to tell, leave it here in the comments. This space is ours. It's safe, and every word matters. I read every comment, and I know many of you also read and find strength in each other's experiences. See you next Thursday, same time, with another story that will move your heart. Till then, take care of yourself, take care of those you love, and remember, life is always worth it. A warm hug, and until next time.